Steel Profiles podcast is brought to you by the AISC Design Guide Series. The second edition of Design Guide 21, Welded Connections, a primer for engineers, is available now. Visit aisc.org/design guides to see what's new and download a free copy today.
Welcome to another episode of Steel Profiles. I'm your host, Margaret Matthew, Senior Engineer in the Engineering and Research Department at AISC. My guest today is Ron Klemencic, PE, SE, and Chairman and CEO at Magnuson Klemencic Associates in Seattle, Washington. Ron received his Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Purdue University in 1985 and his Master of Science in Structural Engineering from the University of California, Berkeley in 1986. Ron has worked on projects in 25 states and 24 countries. He is sought out internationally by developers, architects, and contractors for his creativity and big-picture approach. He continues to lead the advancement of performance-based seismic design of tall buildings. Ron serves on AISC Task Committee 5 on Composite Design, is a board member of the Charles Pankow Foundation, and is a fellow and past chairman of the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat. In 2018, Ron was named as ENR's Award of Excellence winner. Welcome, Ron. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit down and talk to me today.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you.
I've read a lot of really interesting things about you, starting with that you were building cities in your sandbox when you were 5.
Yes.
Did you
earlier.
Or earlier?
I don't know. I can't exactly remember that far back, but I know when I was very young. In fact, I have photographs in our family photo album of me in my sandbox with my matchbox cars and my buckets and shovels and building cities and then demolishing them and building new ones.
So you always knew you wanted to be an engineer?
Well, heavens no, not at 5. I mean, I liked building cities, and that was all fun. I think the first time I knew what an engineer might actually be wasn't until probably around middle school, because I remember distinctly in 6th grade drawing many designs of mansions, very large homes with bowling alleys and swimming pools and things, and thinking I was going to be an architect. And sharing them with
funny, that's how a lot of us start out.
Yes, sharing those pictures with my elementary school art teacher, who encouraged me to keep drawing and keep dreaming and translating my dreams into paper and pencil. And so that was kind of at least my first inkling with actually thinking about designing buildings. But I was going to be an architect, and then I have 2 uncles who are both civil engineers. And around 8th grade or so, they sat me down over one summer and talked to me about the difference between an architect and an engineer.
I'm curious what they told you that difference was.
Well, simply put, that, at least in my context, that I had a strong aptitude for math and science, and that my drawing skills were less than exciting or less than exceptional, and that perhaps engineering might be more in keeping with my natural talents. And them both being civil engineers, one was a actual civil engineer turned contractor, and the other one was a civil engineer who was working in infrastructure, mostly for Georgia Power and Light. And they just talked to me about kind of what they did as their jobs, and I was particularly drawn to the construction aspects of what they described in their jobs, and thinking, wow, it's really fun to build things. So that was maybe 8th grade when I first knew maybe what an engineer was. Still didn't really know, but kind of thought, well, okay, that makes sense to me. Maybe if I work hard in science and math, then I'll find my way through an engineering line of study.
So you did. You earned your bachelor's degree at Purdue University and your master's from the University of California at Berkeley. What do you think was the biggest strength of each program?
Well, at Purdue, I have to say, looking back to my career there, that the strength of the program lied in 2 aspects. One, primarily in the fact that the faculty, the professors, taught the undergraduate classes. There weren't a lot of, well, there were TAs, but the TAs really just graded the homework. They weren't really actively engaged with the students, where in all of my classes throughout my undergraduate career, every class was taught by a professor. We had direct one-on-one engagement throughout, which was fantastic because they were really exceptional teachers. Maybe they weren't the most well-known as far as research and development went, but they were extraordinary teachers, and so that was really beneficial to getting a really sound baseline of understanding of engineering. And then at Berkeley, when I went to Berkeley, of course, at that time, Berkeley was the #1 structural engineering school in the country. The faculty was profound with Professor Wilson and Professor Chopra and Professor Scordelis and Professor Bertero and on and on and on. And I had all of them for my classes. And so the guys with their names on the books.
On the books, yes.
And so learning from the best. Now there was a combination of the faculty teaching and the TAs teaching.
Yeah.
So there wasn't as much direct interaction, but there was still strong interaction with the faculty. And in both instances, to me, that was all the difference. That I can't imagine going somewhere where I wasn't actively engaged with the faculty day by day. And that was really, I think, a big highlight of both experiences.
While you were at Purdue, you were the president of the student chapter of ASCE. And to fund your senior class trip to Chicago, you got very creative with your fundraising efforts.
Yes.
What was your big idea?
Well, you have to recall that we were, I think at the time, 20 years old, and we were college students, and we needed to come up with something fun and exciting and interesting. Anyway, long story short, we decided to sell underwear as our fundraiser to the general student population. And so we came up with a number of designs that we intended to prepare. I don't know what's the right word here. But the idea is we went to J.C. Penney and we bought, a couple boxes, big, large boxes full of men's and women's underwear, onto which we silk screened various designs.
Oh, okay.
And so the idea was you could select your style and color and design, and we would make custom underwear for you. and the real brilliance of this was not so much the uniqueness of the offering, but that we then elected to go night by night, house by house, to all of the fraternities and sororities and sell them underwear with their Greek letters silkscreened on them.
Is that where you made all the money?
That's where we made all the money.
Oh, okay.
And so we actually made many thousands of dollars, enough to send a very large contingent of our senior class to Chicago for, I think, was about a 2.5-day long trip to go visit construction sites and design offices and drink a lot of beer and eat a lot of pizza.
Of course, you had a pizza in
Yes.
Chicago. Okay, so you joined Skilling, Ward, Magnuson, Berkshire early in your career.
1992.
And after only 6 years,
Yes.
you were elected president.
Yes. Yeah. And that was slow by Skilling standards because Magnuson was CEO when he was 32, I think. So.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
so it was kind of a culture there.
Yeah, it remains our culture that it's not about years of experience, it's about talent and skill. And as people show their talents and skills, they rise quickly in our organization. And Magnuson came before me under Skilling's mentorship, and I came under Magnuson's mentorship and rose quickly.
That was my next question, is do you have a mentor?
Yeah, well, I have several actually, but John Magnuson being the most influential and kind of most impactful on all aspects of my life and my career, and to this day remains so.
Do you think that when you first started there that they saw that potential in you and groomed you for that all along? Or?
John Magnuson did.
Yeah.
I don't know that anyone else did. In fact, there are a lot of skeptics and a lot of people wondering who this new kid on the block was when I joined, because I joined the firm 29 years old, and I was just still kind of wet behind the ears in the eyes of many. But Magnuson saw something and initially opened just a lot of doors for me, kind of cleared the path for me to kind of do my thing, and then along the way coached me and mentored me as I found my own way. He didn't really set out a path and say, follow this. He really just kind of let me go as I meandered my way down my path, he would guide me and make sure I didn't go too far out of bounds.
So were you surprised by that?
Yeah, for sure. Completely surprised by that, because that was never really the ambition or the goal. It wasn't my goal to like climb the corporate ladder. I didn't set out to like, I'm going to be CEO or I'm going to have my name on the door. That was never even on the radar screen, really. It was more about, initially in my career, I wanted to design the tallest building in the world. And that was a pursuit for many, many years, designing the tallest building in the world.
That's
and
a big goal.
Yeah, it was a big goal. And today I can say I haven't yet achieved that goal. I have, in fact, worked on 3 of the tallest buildings in the world, not as the engineer of record, but as a formal reviewer of the design. And I have to tell you, after having worked on now 3, it's not my goal anymore. While I still am fascinated and interested in things that are tall, today I get a lot more satisfaction and am far more interested in the group of people with whom I'm going to get to work, and how skilled and inspiring and forward-thinking they are. So I would be very happy to work on a very modest-sized project anywhere on the planet if I get to work with some really cool people.
You're quoted as saying, "I have always challenged the norm and sought a better way to design and build." Where does that motivation to innovate come from?
Where does it come from? Fundamentally, I think it comes from my parents, primarily my mother. We're kind of way in the weeds now, but it's this kind of insatiable appetite to learn, coupled with the fear of failure. And you can define failure a number of ways, I suppose, but fear of failure could be fear of losing to my competition, fear of not performing at the highest level, not getting an A in the class, so to speak. All of these things combined kind of fuel the fire, I suppose.
What did your parents do?
My mother was a school teacher, so that's the learning aspect. And she came from a family of educators and people who cared about learning and education. My father was blue collar, and so that's where the work ethic side comes from.
Work hard.
Yes.
So you pioneered the idea of performance-based seismic design, which was a huge innovation in tall building design. So explain the concept and why it was such a revolution.
Yeah, so just one clarification. I didn't really pioneer performance-based seismic design. Those who came before me pioneered it in the area of building renovation. And I borrowed from their framework, their thought process, and adapted it to high-rise. So yes, I was the first person to really take that idea and pull it into the world of high-rise design. So I'll take credit for that. But even before the people that, in particular, I'm going to credit one guy, Ron Hamburger, who's brilliant in his own right, and he really led a big charge as it relates to the framework of performance-based design in general. Even before Hamburger, for example, myself, Professor Bertero at Cal Berkeley, taught a class that was called Limit States Design. At its core, at its essence, that is performance-based design, that you determine in certain serviceability or safety limits, however you define them, and then you design to those limits in a very rational and rigorous way. And that was this course Bertero taught. When I was a student there, he'd probably been teaching it for 30 years prior to me. And that's the essence of performance-based design. So the combination of what had already been developed in retrofit work, seismic retrofit work, combined with this class that I took from Professor Bertero, faced with tall buildings that don't really want to fit into the prescriptive language of the code, the thought in my mind was, why can't I use first principles of engineering, science and math and physics to design anything you could imagine? Why do I have to be limited by these things in the code? And that was kind of the beginning of it all.
You're known for being an expert in tall building design, but I've heard that you are afraid of heights.
Yeah, definitely
Is that
afraid
true?
of heights, yes.
Oh, definitely
Yeah.
afraid.
Case in point here, just a couple of weeks ago, the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco opened. It's 1,070 feet, and it's a tall building. It's not nearly the tallest, right, but it's a very tall building. And our firm designed it. I was very intimately involved in that design. And I did venture to the very top, to the 1,070-foot level where there is a catwalk of steel grating next to the window wash equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And I stepped out there onto the catwalk, and I lasted about 20 seconds. And I had to leave because my whole body becomes overwhelmed with adrenaline and this sense that I want to jump.
Oh, okay.
And of course I didn't, so that's a good thing. But I get this very freaky feeling, and I get very almost dizzy. And tingly, and I think it's adrenaline flowing through my body, but I need to leave. And I went down off the catwalk into the building, and once I'm inside the enclosed space by the glass, I'm okay.
Then you're fine.
But it's being out in the open at a high height, I can't take it. I can't take it. So I had to leave.
So as long as you're inside the building, the height doesn't bother.
I've been to the top of the Burj Khalifa, which is the tallest building in the world today, and I've been to the observation deck, and there's an outdoor component to the observation deck, and I went outside, and I didn't last more than a minute. I couldn't be out there. I had to go back inside the enclosure, and then I was fine.
Is this something you've had your whole life?
As long as I can remember, yeah, which is very odd. People ask me about it. How can you be an expert in tall building design? And
that you wanted to design the tallest building in the world.
and so my kind of sarcastical comeback to that question is, well, I'm a structural engineer, and that means I have a profound respect for gravity.
That's an excellent comeback. That is an excellent comeback.
Anyway, that's what we do, right?
Yes, that's what we do. So you're at the forefront of the design and construction of the Rainier Square Tower project in Seattle that utilizes a new composite construction technique that's being called a game changer in the industry. What is this new phenomenon?
Right, so we hope it's a game changer. Still to be proven, but we're well on our way. The issue is this: for many years now, for the lion's share of my career, we've been building not just MKA, but most structural engineers have been designing tall buildings that have reinforced concrete cores in them, and then are surrounded by steel framing, mostly office buildings. With those designs comes a certain construction schedule and a certain approach to how you actually make the building, how you actually build it. And what we've learned from that experience is that the construction of the concrete core determines the schedule for the building. And so the question was, how can we build that faster? And so part of the answer lied in this composite core wall construction. So instead of having a reinforced concrete core that is jump formed and leads ahead of the steel erection, to instead put the entire scope of work into the steel erectors' camp and let them erect as they go all at once. On paper, proved very promising, saving on paper at least many months, at least as predicted by the engineers, myself and others. But now that we're under construction with Rainier Square, the steel fabricator and erector are confirming, again on paper, that they think it's going to save actually quite a bit more than we predicted. We predicted 4 months of savings. They're saying 8. 8 months of savings is crazy.
Wow.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Even 4 would be good as it relates to the financing costs of construction, the overhead of the contractors, and getting the rent paid sooner. There's millions and millions of dollars at stake for the owner of the building if we can really achieve this. And right now, I think it's 4 months. The contractor thinks it's 8 months. Let's call it 6. That's amazing.
That'll still be fantastic.
Yeah.
So the system saves so much time because you're using steel plates kind of as the formwork.
Yeah, the
for
steel
the concrete,
plates
and then they don't, then formwork doesn't have to be taken down. You don't have to wait for concrete to cure.
Yes, all of these things. The steel plates do more than just act as a formwork. They're replacing the reinforcing steel. So there's no reinforcing steel involved in the system. It all can be prefabricated in panels, so you're putting up large sections of the wall in one go. Included in that can be all of the door openings and mechanical and electrical penetrations can all be prefabricated in the shop. And then once it gets to the field, it's just setting pieces in place. And the erectors are able to set the pieces very quickly at a rate that, in round terms, are as twice as fast as you could build a reinforced concrete core. So if it takes, let's say, 1 week to build one floor out of reinforced concrete, we can build 2 floors in steel. I mean, it's kind of at that sort of comparative rate. It's twice as fast in steel. And so this is the promise of the system, is speed. And at the moment, right, where all systems are go, the building's under construction, and by the end of this year, we'll probably be a third of the way up in the air. And so then I won't have to tell you that, yeah, we hope it's that fast. We'll have the evidence, right?
So it's under construction. Where are they at in construction right now?
Right now they're digging a very deep hole. The owner's requirement was for 7 levels of parking below grade. So they're right now about halfway down with the excavation. They've dug about 40 feet. They've got about 40 more feet to go. They're due to be done with the excavation in mid-July. And steel erection is supposed to start in earnest in August.
Okay.
And so once they start steel erection, they're predicting 13 months from the top of the foundation, which is at basement -7, to the roof, which is effectively level 59. 66 levels of construction in 13 months.
Wow.
Is what they're talking about.
So with all of the advantages of the system, what are the potential problems that you've had to work through?
Well, so far, no problems. We've anticipated a lot of things. I'd say the one thing that we're most, I wouldn't say concerned about, but have our eyes on very carefully and very thoughtfully is, I'll describe as field fit-up. When these panels arrive, they're all being fabricated in Portland, and they're being shipped to Seattle on trucks. As they arrive to the site and are picked and erected and set in place, from one panel to the next, how do they actually fit together? And will they fit together closely enough that the connection in the field can be made as planned?
Is that a welded connection?
Yeah, in Seattle we gave the contractor the option of bolting or welding, and it was the contractor's choice to weld, mainly for the same exact reason, field fit up, that they feel like they have more tolerance and flexibility if they weld than if they tried to align bolt holes, because it was not a few bolts, it was a lot of bolts. And to have all those holes match up in the field, they were concerned that they would not, and it wouldn't give them as much tolerance and flexibility, so they've chosen to weld. We're working diligently with a few fabricators around the country to reimagine that connection as a bolted connection that will allow some field tolerance, so that in markets like New York or Boston or Chicago, where welders are few and far between and very costly once you get them, to be able to make those field splices as a bolted splice. And so technically it's possible. We can design it. It's not a problem. It's just making it contractor friendly, which is really kind of what we're scratching our heads on at the moment.
So you said that the panels are prefabricated with the openings in them for mechanical, electrical, plumbing.
Right.
Was that hard to coordinate so far this time?
Yeah, so in the case of Rainier Square, fortunately, it was relatively easy because the owner of the project, Wright Runstead, has a long-standing relationship with the contractors and subcontractors. And so the contractor and subcontractors were at the design table from the beginning, which is unusual, frankly. Most times that's not the case, and what often happens is we're panicking in a chaotic sort of way during construction to coordinate these mechanical and electrical openings.
Right.
Because it's not till it's under construction that the contractor is engaged and figures it out. Even with the best efforts of a mechanical and electrical engineer on the design side, oftentimes the contractor decides they want to change things for their own convenience.
Sure.
In the case of Rainier Square, that wasn't the case because the contractor was involved from the beginning. So we had that luxury. But I think for this system, there's great benefit to be achieved if that can be coordinated and those penetrations can be fabricated in the shop. It's not that they can't be installed in the field, they can. And in fact, you'd say that from one point of view, if you have to cut a new opening into the core wall, in the case of this system, you can actually see what you're cutting, as opposed to a reinforced concrete wall where you don't really know where the rebar is until you actually get in there and cut it.
Right.
So from that aspect, it's actually a bit simpler because you know ahead of time what you're going to deal with.
How thick are these panels?
They vary. On Rainier Square, the thickest are 42 inches, so quite thick at the base, and they're as thin as 18 inches. But all of that thickness relates to the design of the building overall. That's not inherent necessarily to the system. They'd be that thick if they were reinforced concrete.
Sure.
It's just the geometry of this particular building.
This system is a perfect example of taking research in the lab and quickly translating it into design practice. So were you involved with the research that was done at Purdue? And is
Yes, from the beginning being in the late 2000s, almost 10 years ago now. We started thinking about this, how do we build faster, more than 10 years ago, and had this idea of this composite core wall design back then, and we ended up working with Purdue to put a research program together to start testing panels and this construction approach back in the late 2000s. We kind of culminated the first effort in a design guide that was published. We wrote it in, I think, 2010. It might not have been published till 2012. But yeah, from the beginning on the research, and now today we're doing more research at Purdue and at Buffalo, Professors Varma and Bruneau, to improve the efficiency, improve the effectiveness of this system and its various details. So it's kind of ongoing, let's say, improvements.
What is the Pankow Foundation, and how is it integral?
Yeah, so the Pankow Foundation, Charlie Pankow was a building contractor and a real estate developer, mostly in California and Hawaii. Did very well. He was very successful at both real estate development and building construction. During his life and his career, he amassed a fairly substantial fortune. And upon his death, in his will, he instructed the formation of the Charles Pankow Foundation with a portion of his estate to form the endowment to create the foundation. And the purpose of the foundation is to fund research to help the industry better itself. How do we design and build better buildings? So industry betterment activities, whatever they may be, to help the industry design and build better buildings. That's what the Pankow Foundation is and its mission. I was invited to join the foundation's board in around 2005. I had known Rick Kuneth, who is the president of the board. Rick had been the CEO of Pankow Builders, and I knew Rick through my day job, so to speak. They were contractors, we were engineers, we worked together occasionally, and we knew each other, and so Rick, as the Pankow board president, invited me to join the board, and it was the Pankow Foundation who funded the early Purdue research and is currently funding, along with AISC, the ongoing research at Purdue and Buffalo.
So this new system isn't in the building code yet. So how did you get the project approved?
Well, in part it is in the building code, in part. It's in the building code as it relates to nuclear facilities. Professors Varma and Bruneau had been doing a bunch of research prior to my involvement with them, looking at this system in nuclear applications. And so when we went to extend the idea and the research to what we're doing now, that's how we found them, because they had a body of work already that was somewhat relevant, although they were looking at things like blast resistance and projectile resistance and shear resistance for squat walls. They hadn't really thought of tall flexural walls for high-rise buildings.
Right.
But they had a body of work that was relevant, so that's why we engaged them both, because they already had expertise in this type of construction, and they were both very excited to kind of extend their knowledge that they already had to something new. And so that's how we engaged and why we engaged those two researchers, and today continue to work with them on trying to make the system better.
So AISC has a nuclear spec, the N690
Yes.
spec, and then they've got an appendix that talks about...
Yeah, how do we get this approved? That's what you asked. Yeah, all right. So like a lot of things that we do, kind of back to the performance-based design, to today, perform a performance-based design for any building, no matter what its system or geometry, a third-party peer review is required. No matter what jurisdiction you're in, this is kind of the way these projects are executed. So we had kind of the convergence of those two activities on Rainier Square, where not only were we going to do a performance-based seismic design anyways, so we were going to have a peer review anyways, we were doing a new system that wasn't really defined in the code as well. So it just kind of melded together that through the third-party peer review, which included Jim Malley and Ron Hamburger on the structural engineering side, and Michelle Bruneau from the academic side, and then we had C.B. Krause as a seismic ground motion reviewer. They collectively reviewed our design and did not only the performance-based seismic design kind of review, but the system along with it.
So did you have any trouble with the building code officials? Did you have to convince them?
Trouble, no. Convince them, yes. I think the review was properly rigorous. I think I was happy in that all of the participants were productive in their commentary and not trying to be in any way obstructionist. But they asked hard questions. They didn't leave it to say, "Oh, that's great. Here's my signature." They asked very thoughtful and very rigorous technical questions that we had to prove that the system would work. And in many choices, or many design choices for this first building, we made conservative decisions, noting that we didn't really want to fight certain battles, because that really wasn't the prize. The prize was to get the system approved in global sense and build the building. And if we had to be fairly conservative in certain choices along the way, so be it. So that's what we did, and the system was approved. What we're doing now with the research ongoing at Purdue and Buffalo is to now look at those questions where we know we made a conservative choice, and trying to figure out how far then might we push that in the future. So, for example, one of the items that we've been looking at Purdue this last year has been the size and frequency of the cross ties between the two plates. How big do they need to be? How frequently do they need to be spaced? And what different configurations might you imagine in order to have fewer numbers of them? The Purdue work's been very informative to that end. So now we have a better understanding for the next building how we might dial that back a little bit from what we're actually building in Seattle, which clearly, based on the research results, is very conservative.
So do you have plans to use this in another project yet?
Well, I have plans, sure. Question is, do any other developers have plans? We are looking at it for projects in a variety of cities, in Chicago, in Boston, and in New York right now. There's definitely a lot of interest shown by contractors, fabricators, and erectors. It's being studied in great detail. There is a lot of apprehension and a lot of fear factor because it's new.
Right.
And so contractors tend to be pretty risk averse, and owners are even more risk averse. They don't want to be first. And I keep reminding them, well, they won't be first because Seattle's first. You'll be second.
So once you get this one in the air.
Yeah. I think once we're, maybe a third or a half of the way built, then it will ease a lot of concerns of the naysayers who say, well, that can't be done. Well, we're going to do it.
Right.
And then the proof, in 6 months' time from now will be physical. It will be, well, here it is, and how do you argue with that? At the moment, we're studying 3 other specific projects that are very seriously considering this, but there's not been a decision yet to go or not.
So Magnus and Klemencic has started their own foundation,
right.
Research foundation?
Yeah, so that's totally inspired by the Penco Foundation. In our industry, interestingly enough, there is no other like-in-kind organization to the Pankow Foundation. There is no other privately funded entity whose mission it is to support research in the design and construction industry. There are a lot of firms, contractors, architects, and engineers that have foundations, but those foundations generally fund things that are very noble things, everything from scholarships to the symphony to the children's hospital, what have you, but there are none dedicated to funding industry betterment, research and development, except for the Pankow Foundation. It took a number of years for me to kind of figure that out in terms of what that meant for MKA, and figure that out. What I mean specifically is, why is that? In an industry that's sorely lacking in innovation and kind of progressive thinking, why are we as an industry not investing in ourselves? And so, like many things in my life and in my career, we're going to try and lead by example. And the idea is, well, we're going to form our own foundation, fund it with company profits, and its mission is parallel to the Pankow Foundation. And that is to support research and development in our industry for the betterment of everybody, not for a proprietary MKA, I'm going to sell you my new widget. It's for the betterment of all of the industry, the theory being that a rising tide raises all ships. And so we're singular now as the only commercial entity, only engineering, architecture, or construction firm that has a foundation dedicated to that mission. We're hoping others will follow, and we'll see in time.
So what research, what innovations is the foundation currently supporting?
So a couple of things that are high on our list. First and foremost, the couple of things we currently have funded are in the area of performance-based wind engineering. So that we've had great success over the last 20 years of kind of leading the industry toward a better way to design buildings for seismic loads. The light bulb went on a few years ago that, well, why aren't we doing something similar on the wind side? In particular, places like Miami or Boston or Houston, where extreme wind events are fairly regular, hurricanes and very high winds. The engineering framework within which we design today is pretty archaic. And so we're looking to revamp that entire framework for wind design as we did for seismic design. And so that work's ongoing, and the MKA Foundation is funding now 3 different efforts specifically related to that topic, one at the University of Michigan, one at UCLA, and one jointly with the Pankow Foundation and ASCE to write the kind of overall framework guidelines for the industry. So that's one topic. Another topic that we're keenly interested in is water resource management. Noting that kind of our most precious resource on the planet is water, and noting that in places all across the United States there's drought conditions and water shortage problems, and how we go about as civil engineers better managing that resource and funding research projects to better that whole idea. The whole idea of water resource management is an area we've devoted some money and hope to devote more. And then we have a few other items that we're on the kind of development stages. For instance, performance-based fire engineering is a really interesting topic where we see a lot of promise. So that's maybe next year's activity. For the moment, it's wind and water. When I grew up, very famous band, Earth, Wind, and Fire. We're kind of taking our cue from them. We don't have a dirt project yet, but we have wind and we have fire. So
I'm sure it'll follow then.
Yes, perhaps.
You currently serve on AISC's Task Committee 5 on Composite Design, and you've previously served as the chairman of the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat. Why do you think committee work is important?
Again, it's this notion of industry betterment and knowledge sharing. I have a very profound respect for those who came before and the knowledge that we can build upon. And I think it's our collective obligation to not go backwards, but to go forwards and to use that knowledge and that benefit that we all can live from and benefit by to move it forward for the next. And we do that collectively as a whole, not individually as little isolated pieces, because how the industry moves forward is through kind of global adoption, and global adoption only comes where there's lots of people engaged. And so how you get them engaged are through these types of organizations, whether it's the Council on Tall Buildings or ACI or AISC or any of the number of the other things I'm involved in. It's really getting buy-in from large constituencies that, yes, we all agree this is a benefit thing for the industry. And then everybody does it and we move.
You took over as chairman of the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat 2 months before 9/11.
Yes, wow, yes.
What was your message as spokesman for the council when 9/11 happened?
Yeah, that was a very traumatic event for all of us. Funny story, I don't know, funny is not the right word, but an interesting story to tell, right? So 9/11 occurred and we were all in shock and stunned and trying to digest what we were seeing unfold. I guess it was 2 days after, so it would have been September 13th. My phone rang, and it was Nadine Post, who's the buildings editor for Engineering News Record magazine, and she didn't even announce herself. She just, the first words out of her mouth are, "What are you going to do? You're the chairman of the Council on Tall Buildings. What are you going to do?" And I was like, wow, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And so we had a really good chat, she and I, and through that discussion, it occurred that the Council on Tall Buildings could serve as a voice for the industry as to what should we do. So what we ended up doing was we organized a group of the council leadership in all disciplines, from owners to architects, structural, mechanical, electrical, contractors. I mean, that's the power of the Council on Tall Buildings. It's a multidisciplinary organization, not just structural engineers. It's all people involved in tall buildings. And we got together as an industry and talked about what should be the response. And we ended up writing some guides in the aftermath of 9/11 to help move the industry forward in kind of a thoughtful and rational way, at the same time trying to address the concerns of the general public as expressed through the media about, we'll never build another high-rise building and high-rises aren't safe, and we helped change that dialogue a bit, at least, maybe not completely, but a bit, to something that was a bit more rational in terms of what can be done and what was the problem in 9/11. The problem wasn't tall building safety,
Right.
It was airport security.
Right.
and letting people have access to missiles, essentially airplanes.
Right.
And so the solution to that problem wasn't building stronger buildings, it was preventing the airplanes from running into them. That's not to say we shouldn't build better buildings, and so that whole event caused us to look very carefully and very thoughtfully at what improvements should we make. And since 9/11, there have been a number of improvements made on high-rise safety, but in a more thoughtful and rational way that are actually meaningful, as opposed to trying to build a fortress in the sky or not build them at all because we're afraid. So anyway, the bottom line, Tal, is the council served a really important purpose in bringing the dialogue together and having an industry response that was based in kind of reflection and thought, kind of a pragmatic view of what should we do.
Right, and not a response based on fear.
Right, not on fear and not an emotional response that would suggest that we ought to have buildings with no windows, for example, because they need to be concrete bunkers.
Right.
It's not really the right thing to do. So anyway, today, thankfully, tall buildings are safer than they have ever been, and we continue to try and improve them, of course. But based on 9/11, we made a lot of advancements and improvements.
So in 2002, you received the Civil Engineering Alumni Achievement Award from Purdue, and in 2013, you were honored again as a Purdue Distinguished Engineering Alumnus. So what did that mean to you from your alma mater?
Yeah, it's fantastic. From Purdue in particular, because I, of course, have a fond memory of those days. To be recognized is wonderful from any organization. It's certainly nothing I ever set out to try and achieve. It's not like I'm trying to win awards or anything. I just kind of go about my business. And it's lovely that people occasionally take notice. And Purdue, just having the soft spot in my heart for Purdue, it's wonderful to have that recognition.
You were also just named ENR's 2018 Award of Excellence winner for daring to innovate, for spearheading the age of cooperative research and development, and for your relentless pursuit of a better and more constructible built environment. So at the award ceremony, you gave a very impassioned speech about research and innovation. Can you talk about the origins of your interest in that topic?
Yeah, so there wasn't any one particular moment. It's been an evolution that has had many chapters to it. I think the one thing that is maybe a tipping point for me was in the category of performance-based seismic design, where it wasn't until a broader group of engineers, to be very specific, some of my competitors, recognized it and adopted it as a good idea, that it really took hold and became kind of a movement or a change in industry practice. It wasn't until that moment where others recognized its value that it really became something. Before that, it was this a little anomalous thing that MKA and Ron Klemencic were doing off in our little corner. And it was the fact that seeing that evolve as it did, that's when the light bulb went on in my mind, is that reflecting on a lot of other things in our industry where people or organizations come up with an idea and then they patent it.
Yes.
Or they copyright it, or they do something to protect their intellectual property.
Right.
And I'd say, by and large, those products or ideas die a very slow death and never receive or never achieve that kind of global adoption by the industry because of the fragmentation of the industry and because I think it's the competitive nature in that fragmentation that says, well, if my competitor invented this thing and now they want to get a royalty every time I use their thing, the last thing I'm going to do is specify their thing. And it's almost a built-in failure mechanism.
Yeah, a resistance.
Yes. And so the idea was if the product or the methodology or the idea is so good that it really can transform the industry, why not give it to everybody? And then it will. If I would have somehow patented performance-based seismic design, I don't know if that's possible, but if I had done that, I don't think it would have gone anywhere. Because, okay, I'd be doing it, and MKA would be doing it, but no one else would be, and what would that really mean?
And the same thing with this new system,
right, same thing.
System.
Certainly, that's why we didn't patent it. There's no point. Because, okay, I might get to design 1 or 2 or 3 buildings. Nobody else would benefit from that. We really wouldn't have moved the industry.
Right, the industry wouldn't benefit.
Yeah, so, I know that there's some of my competitors kind of scoff at this whole notion of, that I'm somehow some bleeding heart liberal and that I'm just giving away all of my profits and blah, blah, blah. And I don't look at it that way at all. I look at it from the sense that as an engineer, right, one of the things that drives me is always striving for the next thing, always striving to improve and be better. So by the time the industry adopts performance-based seismic design, I'm already 3 steps on to the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And then it's that never-ending quest and that never-ending pursuit of the next thing. So I have no fear of running out of ideas or running out of steam on that topic, because I don't believe there is an end. It's just a race that has no end.
So speaking of that, what do you predict will be the next big thing?
Yeah, well, the 3 areas where we're putting our money right now, and that is water resource management, wind engineering, and fire engineering. I think in those categories, there's huge advancements that can be made in very short order, as opposed to some other things that I think in the long term perhaps have some merit. But I think we're a long ways away from those things transforming the industry. For example, alternative cementitious materials, cement replacement. We're decades away from that being impactful on the industry at all for a whole variety of reasons. Or three-dimensional printing of buildings. It's nice to dream about maybe doing that on Mars. Okay, fine. But to actually do that in a production sense for a suburban office building in Chicago ain't going to happen in my lifetime. And so I think that those are interesting technologies, but I don't think they're going to have the impacts in the near term that maybe are purported to be. But these other topics that I mentioned, I think are low-hanging fruit for very significant advancements in the near term.
What do you think are the 3 most important characteristics a practicing structural engineer should have?
Well, kind of thinking about my own experience, first, this insatiable desire to learn and to not think that you somehow know everything ever. And that always questioning why is it that way, and always trying to learn. So that's maybe number 1. Number 2, it's been my experience that the most successful people in our industry, architects, engineers, contractors, the most successful people are also exceptional communicators. They're able to take their ideas and explain them and relate them very simply so that others can digest them. And so having very, very good communication skills, you could be the smartest person in the world, and if you aren't able to communicate your ideas effectively to those of us that aren't so smart, you're nowhere, basically. Nobody will get it. And so communicating, I think, is really key to all of that. I don't know, just maybe those 2. Just learning all the time and being able to communicate. It's pretty simple.
You're known for being an excellent public speaker. Was that something that came naturally to you, or did you have to work at it?
Well, that's something I had to work at, not inherent in my being, so to speak. But I learned from who I think in our industry is the best, and that's John Magnuson. His communication abilities eclipse mine by orders of magnitude. He's got this really innate ability to take very challenging topics and make them very relatable and very understandable. He's taught me so much about how to present and communicate ideas. He continues to coach me on those things. I mean, a recent realization that I had, he didn't ever say these words to me, in fact, but it's from his mentorship that I made this realization, is that when I'm making a presentation, for example, early schooling from him came in that when I make a PowerPoint deck and I'm going to make a presentation, he used to say, all right, for every word you include on a slide, you owe me $1. And if you put a complete sentence on a slide, you owe me $100. It's a humorous statement, but the thought being that word slides are death.
Right.
Absolutely. And so my more recent realization and the mantra that I try and live by when I make my presentations is my words should impact your brain and my images should impact your heart. And it's that combination of kind of thought and emotion that makes the presentation impactful. In particular, like on the E&R presentation, take as a starting point, how can I convey my thoughts, both verbally and through imagery, to really have them complement each other and make them more powerful.
What do you see as the greatest challenge that are facing engineers and engineering companies today?
Oh, there's many challenges. A couple that I see. One thing we've already talked about, and I'll call it drag in the system, but this built-in reluctance to innovate and advance. It's born in risk aversion from owners to contractors to engineers, that if we do anything other than what's already been done, other than what's tried and true, somehow we're taking unusual risk. And with that risk comes potentially loss of profits, loss of money, loss of prestige, what have you. And so there's a great reluctance. So that's a great challenge, is to try and be confident enough that if you do your work thoughtfully and properly, the risks are manageable. And not being afraid of doing something new just because it's new. If you manage it thoughtfully and properly, then it will be fine. So that's one area. Another area that I don't have a solution for, but I think it's really impacting our industry now, is I'll call it information overload. That there's so much information that our younger staff in particular is bombarded by through social media and through access through the internet. It's overwhelming. And the ability to communicate quickly through text messaging and Instagrams, and it's just this barrage of information, and to how to filter that in a way that allows people to be efficient and productive and focused on their task or their mission. It's very difficult, and it seems to be getting more difficult. And I don't know how to solve that particular thing yet, but I'm thinking about it. I don't have a good idea. Maybe little cocoons of isolation.
Little isolation pods.
Yes, isolation pods. But it is, I think, a huge challenge, and it is overwhelming, I guess, is the punchline there.
What advice do you wish that you had had when you were starting your career?
Go slower.
Really?
Yeah, I go too fast sometimes. So going slower would be maybe okay. Mm-hmm. Going fast all the time is maybe not always the right thing. So I've slowed down quite a bit. John Magnuson he would comment on speed, and I was going too fast.
Too fast, like in your design?
No, not just going from one thing to the next, to the thing, next to the next, to the next, to the next, and never taking a moment to pause and reflect, or to pause and kind of just relish in the thing, whatever the thing is. Taking some time to celebrate. I tend to move on to the next thing, even though maybe I should have celebrated. I don't have time for that. Let's do the next thing. And so maybe that's the thing to note, is that along the way, along the journey, taking some time to just chill out and enjoy it for a few minutes before you got to do the next thing. Because that was one thing that I have not done well enough.
If you were not an engineer, what other profession do you think you would have liked to have other than an architect?
Yeah, I'll give you 3.
Okay.
Because they were episodes in my life. Early in my life, or like when I was in my 20s, I truly had a desire, a fascination to want to be a professional volleyball player.
Well, you are very tall.
I was a fairly skilled volleyball player in my high school and collegiate years. I had some aspirations of wanting to do that, but back in those days, now this was the mid-'80s, there really wasn't any money to be made doing that. There wasn't a pro beach circuit. There wasn't any sponsorships. There was nothing. It was basically the life of a hobo, which my mother made me profoundly and acutely aware of. So my pro volleyball career kind of never materialized because there wasn't any career to be had. So abandoning that and then going into engineering and kind of doing that was fine. And then at some point, late 20s, 30s, in there, I had this fascination of wanting to be in the restaurant business, because I liked people and entertaining people and being kind of gregarious, and I liked food and good wine, and that sounded really fun. And I have one good friend who's actually in the restaurant business, and after observing him for a number of years, I said, well, maybe not, because that's really, really hard.
Yes.
And so I had that fantasy for a while, but then reality set in and said, well, yeah, maybe not so much. Today, the 2 things that I think are on my list, one is I'm very passionate about this idea of industry betterment, and if and when I decide to be done with my day job, which there's no near-term plans for that, but if and when I were to be done, I can see myself remaining engaged in research and development through the Pankow Foundation, through the MKA Foundation, because it's just very enjoyable and fun for me to work on things that advance the industry. I get great satisfaction out of that. It's very good for my mental health to be thinking about new things, and I get a great deal of enjoyment out of that. And the other thing that's come up just recently, as in the last year or two, is vegetable farming.
Okay, that's
and
different.
it's a bit of a joke, I suppose, in the sense it's a little tongue-in-cheek. But what attracts me about vegetable farming is one is I do like to cook and I do like to eat good food, and having your own fresh produce is a really wonderful thing if you're a cook. I have ventured to Italy a couple times, and they're wonderful about having kind of the farm-to-table idea where they're growing the tomatoes and the cilantro and all of the products right there in the garden outside of the home or the restaurant. And I love that, and I thought, well, that would be fun to have my own vegetable garden, because it's very peaceful, very slow, very soothing and zen-like thing.
Yes.
That I could see after living the life that I have, that would be something as a alternative life that would be fun. Now, others who know me well say, well, that would last for about 3 days with you, and the vegetables wouldn't be growing fast enough, and they would drive you crazy.
Maybe you'll come up with some new innovative way to make them grow faster.
Perhaps Miracle Grow on steroids. But yeah, today, if I were to not do structural engineering in my day job, I would probably spend a fair amount of time still engaged in research and development, and I would have some vegetable plants.
10 years from now, Ron Klemencic sees himself doing what?
Vegetable farming. Yes. I like to snow ski. I like to golf. I like to travel. I like being in places and discovering new things. I don't like the airplane part of the traveling, but the actual, like,
Once you get there?
I very much enjoy that. So yeah, these things: skiing, golfing, traveling, cooking, growing vegetables. And still engaged in R&D. 10 years from now for sure. That seems like the plan.
Well, Ron, those are all my questions for you.
Cool.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. One parting shot, I suppose. It is now my mission and my passion to try to motivate the industry as a whole to invest in itself, to have other firms follow MKA's leadership. And as I mentioned in my E&R speech, I think I used the words shame on us for investing exactly zero in industry betterment. People who will take exception to what I'll say is they say, well, we donate a lot of in-kind time. I think it's a cop-out, personally, that it's kind of easy and you don't scrutinize your in-kind donations as critically as you would if it was money, cold, hard cash.
Right.
And so what I'm asking people, firms, to do is consider what modest sum of your annual profit, not your revenue, but your profit, are you willing to dedicate toward industry betterment activity? And in the E&R speech, I used the number 2%, just as a very modest starting point. I say 0 is unacceptable. So what's the right number? I don't know, 1%, 2%, 10%? Let's start at 2. And if you say 2% of your profit, cold hard cash, and now you're going to invest that money in an activity that you believe will better your firm, at the same time it betters the industry, what is that thing? Surely it's something. What is it? And I'm sure there are other people that have a similar interest in that same thing. And this is one thing that I think the Pankow Foundation could do, is to help create this nexus of energy, this nexus of ideas where like-in-kind people have similar desires or wants or needs and see the same issue to attack, but they only have 2% of $100. They have $2. Well, if I got a lot of people with $2, now we can solve that problem. And so this is where I hope the industry will go, with some drum beating by myself and others involved in the Pankow Foundation, to recognize that we have benefited from all of those that came before us. We've benefited the last 8, 10 years from a wonderful market where we've all made a decent amount of money because the market conditions have been good. And so it's our obligation, I think, to figure out how to give back so that the next generation and the next can have it better. That's the challenge. Where's your 2%?
Does your foundation have a website or anything?
Yes.
People can go to?
Yeah, you can go mkafoundation.org and see what we're up to. And same thing, pankofoundation.org. You can see what the Panko Foundation is up to. Most notably, I think, on the Panko News side, we have recently brought on Ann Ellis as a special advisor to the board, and she's going to help with this outreach campaign, the 2% campaign, if you will. Ann's very noted leader in our industry, and we're looking forward. She just joined us in the last week or two. So very excited about her engagement and involvement and kind of helping move the Panko Foundation and the entire 2% movement forward. So that's kind of the next chapter. Great. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It has been a pleasure.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
This has been a presentation by the American Institute of Steel Construction. For more information on AISC continuing education opportunities, visit us on the web at aisc.org/webinars. And remember, there's always a solution in steel.